This is the Generation UCAN podcast, episode number 4. Today we chat with U.S. Olympian and national champion runner Kim Conley. She shares her nutrition secrets and tells us how her competitive spirit has helped her rise through the ranks of running. The UCAN podcast starts now. Welcome to the Generation UCAN podcast. I'm Varun Sriram, thrilled to be joined today by U.S. Olympian Kim Conley on the 5,000 meter Olympic team back in 2012, and most recently the national champion for the United States in the 10,000 meter race. Kim, how are you doing today?
Good, thanks.
Fantastic. Well, thanks a lot for joining us today, and wow, quite a whirlwind of a year for you so far. PR after PR after PR. How's it been?
It's been really fun. We started the year early with an indoor season, so I got to play with some of those shorter distances and set some PRs there, and then built up for the outdoor season. Was able to set PRs in the 3K and 5K and 10K as well. So it just kind of worked out that I got to set PRs, across the distances from 800 all the way up to 10K.
And, you've had a good amount of signature moments this season. Two that kind of stick out to mind was, of course, the great race you ran to win the 10,000 meter national championship just a couple months ago. But then you also had in the mile, setting the course record at the Armory in New York City. Really a great place for an event, setting the course record in the mile at the New Balance Games with the 4:24:54. What's been your favorite moment so far from this year?
I definitely have to go with the national championship 10K, partly because it was in Sacramento, which is where I live and train, so I had that kind of home crowd advantage feel to it, and just to win a national championship has been something that I've dreamed of doing now for several years, and so it was very, very exciting to have it kind of finally come together for me.
With that national championship, a lot of people might say, growing up, being a national champion, being an Olympian was something they dreamed of. I'm curious to hear if, as a young athlete, you had those same dreams, because I guess you didn't really follow the traditional career path of a lot of the other top runners, not a hugely decorated college career and really have risen through the ranks amazingly. So what was that like for you? When did you realize as a young runner that, or when did you start to have those types of dreams?
I guess, my imagination was always pretty active, and I allowed myself to dream even when it was totally unrealistic. So I can think back to stages in college, at least, where when I was injured, actually, and the way I got through some of the kind of like day after day of cross training. I'd sit there on the bike imagining myself winning a national championship to push myself, in those cross-train moments. So I guess you could trace it back to then, but I would say, like, realistically, when did I think it was something that was possible? It wasn't until 2012 and I'd made the Olympic team that I started to kind of set my sights on winning a national title.
Let's talk about 2012. Coming into the Olympic trials that year, how did you approach the race? I know when you're at that moment, everybody's thinking, wow, I'm just one race away, running my best race away from being on the Olympic team. What did you think about your chances, either at the beginning of the year or even going into the Olympic trials?
So going into the Olympic trials, I guess I saw myself as, having an outside shot at making the team, and I knew that, nobody else would expect me to make the team, and so that was kind of liberating because there was no pressure at all. And so it was just kind of a matter of, if everything came together and I played my cards really well, then I'd get to surprise the world. I went into the race with a PR that was only 5 seconds under or slower than the Olympic A standard. So, in my mind, to PR by 5 seconds seemed doable. And I kind of, on paper, I was probably the 5th or 6th ranked athlete. And so I thought, can I sneak into the top 3? Yes, it's possible. It was still a long shot. And then, the odds of having both those things be achieved in one race makes it even slimmer. But I just believed it was possible, and I just wanted to put myself in the best position to try to accomplish it. And came down to a very thin margin, but it all worked out for me.
I know every time people talk to you about the Olympics, I'm sure you get asked this question, but the photo of you, Kim, when you found out that you had made the team, and there's that iconic photo with you, mouth wide open, hands on your head. When you see that photo, I mean, does it take you right back to that moment? What were you thinking in that moment?
Yeah, it does take me right back to that moment. And it was because of the way the race unfolded. There was definitely a moment in the race where I looked at the clock. It was right around the 3K mark, and we were just running much slower than I'd envisioned, in order to achieve that standard. And so I definitely kind of let the race get away from me for a little while, because I just thought getting the A standard was out the window, and so the Olympic dream in my mind was dashed. And then I regrouped and decided to go for that top three finish just for the sake of being on the podium because it was the Olympic trials, which is a huge stage, and so just to get on the podium, even if I didn't make the Olympic team, would have been a major accomplishment and a huge honor. So I kind of regrouped and fought hard for that third spot, but I was just very sure that the time would pop up as 15:22 or 15:21, and the A standard was 15:20. So I just kind of thought that the actual Olympic dream wasn't going to happen, and so then when the time popped up as 15:19.79, I was just so shocked and thrilled.
That's really, really, really memorable. I always have to ask you about that when I talk to you about it. But I was reading. There's a great article recently about you in Running Times magazine that I was reading, and something that I didn't know about you that they talked about was your legendary competitive streak. You're apparently a very, very competitive person, and I guess that's probably seems like part of the reason why you've been able to get yourself to the level you're at and really show that improvement so drastically in recent years. Where does that competitive side of you come in? I'd say from the times I've met you, you're not the most, you're not like a loud and boisterous person. So where does that competitive streak come in?
I mean, that's a good question. I don't know. I guess I've just always had, a large desire to prove myself, and I tend to cast myself into a little bit of an underdog role, and so then that I kind of always carry that desire to prove myself.
What have you this year really, as you've seen the times improve across the board and a lot of positive results, what are a few of the things you can attribute that to? I mean, I know there's probably several things that go into improvement, but are there one or two things where you feel like I've really got this nailed, this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are two that come to mind, and one is just the consistency of training that I've been able to build now over several years, because I haven't been sick or injured in a long time, and so I've just been able to stack training really consistently, probably since 2011 without any major unplanned interruptions. And then the other one I would say is definitely being able to dial in my nutrition, and kind of get into that like really race ready lean state, and timing it now right for the kind of peak phase of the season.
So that's kind of, Kim, bridges us perfectly into something I want to talk to you about overall, and definitely want to get your thoughts on UCAN and how you've been using UCAN and fueling with it, but kind of your overall nutrition. You talked about dialing in your nutrition is one of the big factors in your training, or the consistency in your performances and the improvement. And I've got to think that's, everything from the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. So when you approach your overall nutrition from a philosophical standpoint, how do you go to get about putting together your meals?
I mean, so it depends a little bit on the time of year, but I would say, in a very general sense, I just eat a very healthy and well balanced diet. And then, there's some kind of extra things we do throughout the year that, kind of in different phases of training that make it different. So, for example, in a base phase, we will do some fasted running, where you're teaching your body to rely more on getting energy from fat stores. And I use the UCAN around that too. So that's kind of an integral part of developing that routine. And then So that's like for a base phase of the season. But then in more of a peak phase of the season, we go away from that type of training. But then I actually increase the amount of UCAN I'm using in recovery, just because it's a really good source of steady energy and protein when I'm trying to like dial things back and get nice and lean for races.
Do you are you somebody that's very conscious, in terms of counting your carb, protein, fat intake? Are you very cognizant of that, and how you kind of vary that at different times, or are you more just focused on, eating high quality foods and with the understanding that it'll all come together if you do that?
I find it kind of tedious to play with all the numbers all the time, but I have done it, and then I kind of try to develop some habits based on, calculations I've made in the past, and so I don't have to, count grams of fat or carbs or protein, on a daily basis. But so I will. So one of the things I do kind of in that peak phase is um, I kind of reduce the amount of protein I'm taking in each meal, but then I'm spacing it out throughout the day differently. So that's where like the recovery UCAN is a big part of that, because I actually have a full shake of UCAN each day as one of the kind of the extra meals I have with, so 'cause then I'll get 13 grams of protein in that meal. And so that's kind of in addition to my other meals throughout the day.
Okay, that's interesting, that you do that. And like, what's a typical breakfast for you, if or when you're not doing those fasted runs? I know in the past you've mentioned to me that you enjoy, eating some real food before you get out there for your morning workout. So what's a good pre-run, pre-workout breakfast?
I pretty much always have steel cutouts now that I make with milk, so that I get protein in there, and then always fruit with it, so usually cooked into it or sliced on top, and then coffee.
That coffee, very nice. Need that coffee
Yes.
to give you a little boost in the morning. So let's turn a little bit. You talked a little bit about UCAN, but how did it first come on your radar, Kim, and what was it that intrigued you about putting it to the test?
So actually, it was in 2012, and it was right before the Olympics. Team USA did a team camp in Birmingham, England, and I was rooming with Julie Cully. So she introduced me to it, and she felt like it had really helped her get ready, for that huge year she had in 2012. And so I was definitely interested in it, especially as a recovery tool, because I'd always used chocolate milk up to that point, but I found with chocolate milk, because it's so high in sugar, that I would crash not long after drinking it. And so the great part about UCAN that I love is that I can have it right after a run, and then I can go a couple of hours before I need to eat a meal. And I just have that kind of like steady blood sugar level, and I don't experience the same crash that I did when I was using chocolate milk.
And it's funny when you say that, is I remember talking to your coach Drew, maybe a couple of years ago, and he was, or I can't remember if it was you or him that said this to me, but when you're talking about the blood sugar levels, one of you was talking about how after a workout, you'd often be in a bad mood, and then you attributed that a little bit to your blood sugar levels. Is that true?
Definitely, yeah. I think it makes his life a lot easier if my blood sugar stays steady.
That's funny. And so that was one of the big things, I guess, that you were looking for something to add into your recovery routine. What else have you noticed about it as you've continued to fine tune your use of it? How do you mentioned this, a little bit already, but how do you primarily use it, in your training, and how have you fine tuned the way you use it as you've gotten more familiar with it?
Yeah, so I mean, I would definitely say the primary use is, kind of the typical use, which is, mixing it with water right after a run, to get that immediate recovery in. But I also use it before some afternoon workouts, because I mean, kind of on the same note as the chocolate milk story, I do have to be careful with maintaining kind of steady blood sugar levels. Otherwise, I can bonk pretty hard, and I'd have some problems with that if I did afternoon sessions too. And we like to do some afternoon sessions because so many of our track races are in the evening, that it's good for me to practice that. So what I found is that making a UCAN shake in the afternoon is kind of a second meal after lunch, but before the workout. It wouldn't make me too full for the workout, but I also would just have steady energy throughout the entire workout. So that's definitely a good use. And then the other one, which was me just getting a little bit more creative, but after those fasted runs that I do in the base phase, I really like to come home and make pancakes. And I found that if I substitute, maybe do like a 3-to-1 ratio of flour with UCAN, I can make some really, really good chocolate pancakes, and get a little extra protein into the pancakes. Just a really good recovery pancake meal.
There you go. That's all right. You give me an idea for breakfast tomorrow morning then. And Kim, I know that for you, that you have taken an interest in nutrition. I mean, I've heard you talk about your blood sugar, and you talked about the fasted runs earlier, and training your body to burn fat. I remember when you were in town last November for the around the New York City Marathon and the 5K, that I think you went to some type of clinic, right? Where they were talking about, was it nutrition
Correct.
for a marathon, or so? Just talk to me about your overall interest level in nutrition and kind of studying this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, very interested. Drew and I work hard to learn everything we can to maximize all the angles of being a professional runner and to get the most we can, out of my career. And nutrition's a really big part of that. And I work with a muscle scientist at UC Davis, Dr. Keith Barr, and he stays really up to date with all the latest research on nutrition, specifically for performance. And so he's a really good resource for me, and we're always trying to kind of refine the methods. But yeah, I would say that the fasted running was something we integrated last year, and that we'll do again this year in the base phase. And then also what I talked about with the kind of the peak phase nutrition of spreading out protein throughout the day, taking smaller quantities at a time was another big one.
For a lot of runners, and I don't know if this was the same case, in the elite and the professional ranks as it's been kind of for, the average runner, but a lot of the runners have been, traditionally trained to primarily focus on carbohydrate intake and the amount of carbohydrates they need to support their training needs. Is that, from a nutrition standpoint, something that was kind of ingrained in you as you were coming up through the ranks of running? And is that something that it all has changed, as you talk about integrating fasting runs into your approach?
I mean, yes, in the sense that, as a high school athlete, people talked a lot about carbo loading, and that's just, I think for everybody that's not as, I guess, in vogue anymore. But, I think that at the same time, all those nutrients are important. And so I guess my overall approach is to try not to like cut anything out too much or overdo anything, and that balance really is the key.
That's great, Kevin. I'll ask you one more on the nutrition topic. Then I just want to just talk about your overall training before we wrap up. Using UCAN, and I think you mentioned earlier that one of the keys was really being able to improve your body composition and get defined and leaner. How do you feel like UCAN has worked for you in that regard?
Yeah, so I think it's two things. It's that I've kind of tailored that end of season nutrition, and that I use UCAN as a meal in and of it to itself, because it's got enough protein and it kind of can keep my blood sugar steady enough that I'm not hungry right away. And then yeah, and then it's just I mean, I guess it goes back to the whole blood sugar is that, if I'm crashing, then I feel like I have to eat and I want to eat a lot right away when I get really hungry, but it just keeps my hunger levels really steady. So it's definitely a good snack to use when you need one also.
Really good insight. I know that's a lot of what you said is going to be valuable for a lot of runners to hear. They always are very much interested in picking up nutrition secrets and training secrets from professional runners. So appreciate that insight, Kim, without hopefully giving up too many of your trade secrets, being the competitor that you are. But let's talk a little bit about training. Coming back to the Running Times article, I read that you said that you had always kind of envisioned the marathon as something that you could have success with, and you had the great opportunity this past November to ride on the press truck for the New York City Marathon and see what that was all about. Did that change at all your perspective on whether or not the marathon's the event for you sometime down the road?
I mean, it definitely kind of humbled me, in terms of just what an undertaking the marathon is. I definitely believe that it's in my future, but I guess I realized I didn't need to rush into it, and I'd kind of put myself in this corner where I felt like fall 2014 had to be my debut marathon, and sitting on that press truck and getting around the 10-mile mark. And realizing that we weren't even halfway, and it just suddenly dawned on me what a long race it is, and I realized that it would probably made more sense to try a half marathon before I jumped all the way up to the full marathon. So that's something I'm seriously entertaining for this fall is a half. But yeah, I mean, I do think that the marathon's in my future. But it just, being around that entire event last year and getting to know other marathoners, and seeing someone like Julie who had struggled in the build up and then seeing other people struggle in the race, and it just made me realize that A, it's very hard to get to the line, and then B, once you do get to the line, it's just that you still have so long to go. And so I don't want to underestimate the marathon, and so when I make my debut, I want to be ready. And yeah, I want to give it its due, I guess.
As you put your races together over the course of a season, how do you decide, what distances you're going to race, what you want to focus on, and what's the whole thought process that goes into that?
So I usually work backwards from I mean, really now in a very general sense, we plan out in Olympic cycles, and so Rio is really kind of the pinnacle of what we're trying to do right now, and I would say working backwards from there, the World Championships next summer in Beijing are a very important milestone, and so we kind of work backwards from those two events, and look at everything we feel like we need to do to have us best prepared for those races.
Okay, so it does. And with the Olympics, is it 5,000 that you're focusing on again, or will that be dictated by, just where you see yourself at the time?
Yeah, I definitely think it will just depend on how I feel I can do, both in terms of making the team at the U.S. trials and then how I can do on the world stage. And so at this point, I want to have my options open for both the 5,000 and the 10,000.
Overall, when you're, what distance do you like training for? What's most enjoyable for you, or do the training for the different distances not vary incredibly?
Um, so far, they haven't varied a lot. I would say maybe my training is a little bit more specific to the 5K. Um, but I really, really like the long, hard workouts, and that's part of it kind of ties into why I see myself eventually in the marathon, partly because the training for it appeals to me. I really love the 2 hour long runs or the progressive long runs or the 10-mile tempos. That's just what makes me feel really good and strong, and those are the type of workouts that make me feel like I'm getting really fit. And so yeah, I mean I guess that's why I feel like the longer distances are in my future.
Beyond just getting out there and running, what are the other core aspects of your training?
So I'll go into the weight room twice a week, and we do a core routine twice a week, and then we'll do speed development once every 10 days to 2 weeks, which is kind of the complete opposite of the type of training I was just talking about. it's like six all out 50-meter kind of max velocity sprints. Um, and then I'll do, some type of body work like chiropractic, active release therapy, or massage once a week.
And daily, let's put everything in this bucket, but between your various training, between the therapy, stretching, what is the daily life of a professional runner? I mean, how many hours are you putting into training your body to perform its best?
So I mean, morning, so I get up, I make the steel cutouts and have the coffee, and then morning practice usually takes 2.5 to 3 hours, and that's just between like a dynamic warm up that I do, and then the actual run, and then usually when I come back, there's some type of strides or something extra after the run, and then I have a cool down routine that involves stretching and rolling, and the UCAN, and then go home, eat some lunch, take a nap, and then I'll have an afternoon session a lot. And if it's a weight room day, because I'll do my weight room days in the afternoon, then that can take anywhere from an hour to another 2.5 hours if I'm, running and in the weight room, and then home for dinner.
Okay, so it's a yeah full day. It's a
Yeah.
from time you wake up to the time you go to bed. Kim, just a couple more to close this out. As you've had more and more success, you've had some different cool opportunities come your way, and different appearances, and the opportunity to speak to whether it's kids or kind of inspire other runners. What's the message you try to convey to people when you are out there in the public and have the opportunity to interact with other people who want to meet you because of who you are?
Yeah, I mean, I think the message I like to convey is just that, success comes with just kind of laying down the basics of hard work, but mostly consistent work over a long period of time. On my website, I have the quote, it takes years of hard work to become an overnight success. And, I've always believed that. And I actually first wrote that quote down, and would tell it to myself back in, I think, 2010. So before I had even really made a splash on the national scene. But in the end, it really did apply to my career because it was all those years of the work that led up to that big moment in 2012.
So you've always been a big dreamer. Then what is the big dream right now? When you think this is what I want to accomplish, this is where I want to take this thing. What's that light at the end of the tunnel?
It's definitely now, back then, it was all about, trying to be one of the top athletes in the country and one day making an Olympic team. And I'd kind of I had myself on a path where I thought I could possibly make the team in 2016. And then, all of that changed in 2012 because I snuck on the team that year. And so, since then, the dreams have definitely evolved into now being more internationally focused and what I can do on the world level, and I'm starting to set my sights a little bit higher.
And from a United States running perspective on the world stage, how important, like when you talk to other runners from across the country, and you're with the other elite runners in the events you run, how important collectively is it for you guys to really show U.S. distance run or U.S. running even in a prominent light on that world stage?
Yeah, very important. It's definitely a huge movement I would say that's happening right now, and it's starting with the middle distances, but it's definitely kind of trickling over into the longer distances. And when you see someone like Brenda Martinez, kind of step up and she works so hard, and to see her win a medal last year at the World Championships, that gets us all excited about what's possible.
In terms of other, American pros, who do you enjoy competing against? Maybe one or two people that you really enjoy competing against, or is there anybody that you have a particularly fierce or good races, good competitions with?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. I get along really well with Molly Huddle and Amy Hastings. And so, it's always fun to be at races with them, and we're good friends. but I mean, yeah, I mean, all of them. And, Julie, it was really fun to get to know her in London. And there's just so many. I mean, we all kind of get along, and just one of those things where you enjoy each other's company, and then you toe the line, and you have to go try to beat each other.
And you recently, I don't know if it's recent, but I think it's relatively recent, started the NorCal, Northern California Distance Project, where you've got an elite training group out, in Northern California. What exactly is the group, and how new is it?
Yeah, so we just formed that I mean, it's been kind of coming together over the last year or so, I'd say. But kind of officially, put a name to it, got a website up, and, are really running with it in June. And basically, it's kind of bringing together the kind of elite post-collegiate women in this area, and then trying to recruit some to move to this area to really develop it. But with kind of the idea of making that transition that I made from kind of sub-elite runner to but really trying to produce more athletes that will contend to make U.S. teams.
How important is that group training atmosphere for in your mind? I know that you go to altitude and train with other athletes. What does that give you that really helps foster and produce high level athletes?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important, I think, to surround yourself with people that bring out that right kind of work ethic in you, and passion for the sport. But it's just nice to have training partners that, some people will say it's to hold you accountable, and I guess it is that, but mostly it's that, we all enjoy working hard, we can enjoy it even more when we're out there together.
Well, Kim, really want to thank you for your time today. It was great catching up with you. Good to hear about what all you've been up to and get us a little bit of a snapshot of your training. What's next for you? When can people catch you racing next?
So the next big race I'll do is the .US 12K Championships, which will be in Virginia on November 16th.
Alrighty, so we'll definitely be looking for another great performance from you. Thanks
Thank
again
you.
to Kim Conley for joining us. Really appreciate it. Great year for Kim, and Kim, wishing you good health and continued success. Thank you so much.
Thank you.